giving permission to Ukraine to use ATACMS missiles to strike targets in Russia. Vladimir Putin said, we know how these missiles operate. We know that this can't happen without American hands making the target information, loading the target information into the missile. So any attack using ATACMS missiles on Russian soil will be treated as an American attack against Russia. I just want to lay that out there. That's not me saying it's not analysis. This is a statement of fact made by the Russian president. And he said that this will fundamentally change the character of this conflict. It'll make America a direct participant in the conflict. The UN ambassador, the Russian ambassador to the United Nations, the next day went a step further. He said for the United States to do this would be a declaration of war against Russia. And then Anatoly Antonov, who was at that time the Russian ambassador to the United States, furthered that by saying that America won't be able to hide behind the Atlantic Ocean, that the consequences won't be limited to just Europe, that America will be a target itself. Those three inputs, I think, helped stay the hand of the United States. Joe Biden didn't sign off on that decision, and that held until now. Now, Joe Biden hasn't come out and said things officially. Indeed, his State Department came out and said, we have no new news to put in, but this is part of the tactic. You see, NATO and the United States believe that Russia is bluffing. They don't believe anything that Vladimir Putin said is real, that Putin is just talking, but there won't be any consequences for their actions. But rather than give the Russians a hook by announcing a formal change in policy, it just happened. As Zelensky said, the president of Ukraine, we'll let the missiles do the talking. Well, the missiles have talked. This isn't the Ukrainians claiming an attack. This isn't the United States saying that they authorized this attack. This is the Russian Defense Ministry saying that 6 ATACMS missiles were used against a target on Russian soil. 5 of the missiles were shot down. One of the missiles was hit, but managed to hit the target. Debris hit the target, and there was some damage done. I bring that up to underscore that this isn't about the ATACMS missile being a game changer. This is about calling Russia's bluff. The United States has said, we don't believe you, Vladimir Putin, that there will be consequences to this. And as long as Russia doesn't respond forcefully, this is the beginning of what is a 2-month crash program to make Ukraine part of NATO. This is Zelensky's victory plan. A key component of the victory plan was unshackling him when it comes to being able to strike targets inside Russia that he believed has to be struck in order to better defend against Russia's ongoing offensive. These attacks that are taking place now are done in relation to the Ukrainian incursion into Kursk and appear to have been limited in that regard. Why is Kursk important? Well, earlier this year, Ukraine sent 20 to 30,000 troops into Kursk, which is Russian territory. It's not territory of dispute. It's not Kherson, Zaporizhia, Lugansk, Donetsk, or Crimea. This is Kursk. There is no debating what Kursk is. It is Mother Russia. And Ukraine went in and occupied a significant chunk of Kursk with 20 to 30,000 troops who were trained, organized, equipped, directed by the United States and NATO. This was a NATO invasion of Russia, and Russia recognizes as such. And now we have the United States using ATACMS missiles to support the continued occupation of Russia by NATO troops, wearing Ukrainian uniforms, but NATO troops nonetheless. The goal here is to ensure that when Donald Trump becomes president on January 20th, that Ukrainian troops not only are still in Kursk, but are dug in, entrenched, that their presence has become a statement of fact, that it's unchangeable, that will have to be dealt with any negotiation for the termination of this conflict. It is a bargaining chip now. Ukraine will say, we will return Kursk, but in exchange, Russia needs to return something else. Left to their own devices, Russia will have cleared Kursk out by January 20th. Kursk was in the process of being depopulated of Ukrainian invaders. But now with the ATACMS, The goal is to disrupt Russian command and control, air power, logistics, etc., to help strengthen the Ukrainian position. The other thing is NATO understands that on January 20th, if the status quo is the way it is today, that Donald Trump will shut down this Ukraine conflict and that Russia will prevail. That will cause problems for NATO. One of the big problems is that NATO has put its weight behind making Ukraine a NATO member. What you're going to see between now and January 20th is a push to make Ukraine a de facto NATO member. What the Biden administration and the European allies who despise Donald Trump and are against Donald Trump's policies are seeking to impose as a new reality, one where Ukraine is a de facto member of NATO. That means that not only are they using ATACMS, Storm Shadow, and Scalp, they'll be given new long-range systems that can strike deeper. And of course, Russia's bluffing, so there will be no consequence for this. Russia will continue to do what they're doing, which is to put out lots of words and do nothing. That's the perception. And this will embolden them to put troops on the ground, initially as advisors, but then they'll come in as more, as smaller units to grow into bigger units. But the bottom line is to have several thousand NATO boots on the ground in Ukraine on January 20th. There's a possibility that Poland will now extend its air defense umbrella, a NATO air defense umbrella, into Ukrainian territory to start shooting down or engaging Russian missiles, which is something that the Ukrainians have been asking for now, and maybe even project air power in as part of that interdiction, creating a de facto no-fly zone. At that point in time, with those components, Ukraine is a NATO member. When there is a ceasefire, there will be a NATO presence on Ukrainian soil that guarantees that, contrary to Russia's stated goals and objective of having a neutral Ukraine, Ukraine will be a NATO member. This will be a strategic defeat for Russia. That's the direction we're heading. There's a couple things about this. One, as an American, I take umbrage because the American people voted on November 5th and said that's not the outcome we're looking for. They voted for a president who said, I'm going to bring this war to an end. I'm looking for a peaceful resolution. I'm not looking to expand this war. I'm not looking to pour another $184 billion into a losing proposition. And despite the fact that the American people voted for this, and this is the intended policy direction of the Trump administration on January 20th, the lame duck presidency of Joe Biden has said, we don't care what the American people said. We don't care what Trump wants. We're going to change the game in the 2 months we have left in office. This is fundamentally undemocratic, but moreover, it's fundamentally dangerous. Because what if Russia's not bluffing? What happens when Russia says, okay, we warned you, and now we're going to take action? We now find ourselves moving headlong into a direct confrontation between Russia, the United States, and NATO that will inevitably go nuclear. That's the stakes here. And then you have to ask yourself, why is Biden gambling like this? Is Ukraine worth the survival of the world? That's a fundamental question everybody, including the supporters of Ukraine, have to ask. Is defending Ukrainian democracy, Ukrainian sovereignty, the fundamental issue of our time? If Ukraine was defeated by Russia, does the world come to an end? The answer is no, it doesn't. But Joe Biden and Europe and NATO have just made it an existential issue. That because of Ukraine, the world is now facing the potential of thermonuclear global war on a global scale, the termination of all human life as we know it. This is an outrage. This is an insult to the American people. This is an insult to the international community. And I would also ask, what has Joe Biden will say that he can do this because of the War Powers Act. And of course, he's right. But Congress passed the War Powers Act not to give the president carte blanche to engage military forces, but for the president to use military forces in the times of an emergency where he can't otherwise come to Congress. So if Russia attacked NATO, the president could authorize military response while he prepares to brief Congress on this. But Congress alone has the constitutional authority to take America to war. When was the last time Biden briefed Congress? When has he requested a joint session of Congress to say, I am asking for a declaration of war against Russia? Because from the Russian perspective, America has declared war against Russia. America attacked Russia this morning. America, using the definition set forth by Vladimir Putin, fired 6 ATACMS missiles into Russian territory. 5 of the missiles were shot down. 1 of the missiles was damaged but landed on the target. But nonetheless, 5 missiles fired by the United States, because these missiles could not have been fired without American involvement, struck Mother Russia. That's an act of war in anybody's book, and that's where we're at today. The United States attacked Russia this morning. Now the question is, what is Russia going to do about it?
And what are the latest changes in the Russian nuclear doctrine, Scott, that they were talking about recently?
Well, Vladimir Putin signed off on a doctrine today that he has been talking for some time. And one of the key aspects of this is that Russia will treat any large-scale attack by Ukraine, United States, and NATO using missiles against Russian territory as an existential threat, and they can respond with nuclear weapons. So I just want everybody to understand, under Russian doctrine, what happened this morning could theoretically trigger a nuclear response.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the importance of this doctrine. And the thing is, the West looks at this document and says, well, Russia's bluffing. They're not going to do this. And so they start small. Well, it was only 6 ATACMS missiles. Is that really a large scale? But this will be emboldened, because now France has said you can use Scalp missiles. Great Britain has said you can use Storm Shadow. Zelensky's building his own. He has the drones. And now if you get all of these to act in concert, and let's say on a given day, instead of 6 going in, you have 12 ATACMS, 15 Scalps, 20 Storm Shadows, and 100 Ukrainian drones. That's a mass attack against Russia. And Russian doctrine says they can respond with nuclear weapons. Do you really want to call Russia's bluff on that? Is that really something you want? Is this an issue that is so fundamental to the survival of the world that we're going to put the survival of the world on the table to confront it? And the answer is no. But that's the direction we're heading right now. I personally don't believe the Russians are bluffing, but we'll have to see, because the Russians, they seem to be they fell into the diplomatic trap. I keep hearing the Russians say, well, we haven't heard anything official from the United States. Oh, yes, you did. 6 ATACMS missiles struck Russian soil. That's the official statement there, my friend, because it couldn't have happened. Your president acknowledges it couldn't have happened unless America made it happen. And the military doesn't operate on its own. The military is a function of a command and control system with the commander-in-chief at the top. The commander-in-chief had to authorize this to take place. So don't wait for Jake Sullivan or Anthony Blinken to come out and formally state something. This is the game they're playing, because rightfully so, the United States knows that Russia is a very legally oriented government. And therefore, Russian government is loath to take action until the United States formally articulates a policy change. The policy change has been articulated. They fired 6 ATACMS missiles at you. That's all you need to know. And the sooner Russia acknowledges this reality, the sooner they can act. If Russia doesn't nip this thing in the bud, and normally I'm somebody who advocates for peace and peaceful outcomes, but understand this. The reason why I voted for Donald Trump, and I did vote for Donald Trump, despite all the misgivings I have about Donald Trump, is that when I took a Kamala Harris administration and projected it forward and ran through all the iterations, I came up every single time with nuclear war being waged 6 months to a year into a Kamala Harris thing. A vote for Kamala Harris, in my opinion, would have inevitably resulted in a nuclear conflict. The Trump campaign published an op-ed piece in The Hill, written by Donald Trump Jr. and Bobby Kennedy Jr., that said they want to bring an end to the conflict in Ukraine and prevent a nuclear war. That's the policy direction they're headed on. But now we have a Biden administration that is going to do what the Harris administration, they're going to compact 6 months to a year of Harris administrative policy into 2 months. This is a very, very dangerous situation. I don't know how to say it any more than what I have. If the Russians don't nip this in the bud, if they allow this to continue, that 2 months will result in deployment of NATO troops onto Ukraine, NATO air power projected over Ukraine, NATO missile defense projected over Ukraine. Ukraine will become a de facto NATO member. And that is of an existential issue for Russia. Russia can't allow that to happen, and therefore there will be a nuclear war. So everything I was afraid was going to happen in 6 months to a year is happening now in compacted form. Russia needs to nip it in the bud right now. I can't tell Russia what to do, but Russia has said, I mean, we've had Russian officials come out and say it. A senior member of the Russian Senate, who's involved in the Defense Committee, has said that if this happens, at a minimum, Bankova Street, that's where the Ukrainian government is in Kiev, disappears. And he's talked about using a new weapon, not nuclear, but a weapon of unprecedented power. And we know what that weapon is. The Russians call it the father of all bombs. It's a giant thermobaric weapon that uses aluminum powder, a mix of aluminum powder, but it will be released over the target. It will encompass a giant area with aluminum powder that will then be ignited, and the overpressure will flatten everything and kill everybody in that radius. And it's a massive weapon that would literally gut downtown Kiev. That's what needs to happen right now. The Ukrainian government needs to cease to exist. Russia needs to act on its words, because if it doesn't, then Zelensky will be empowered. He will believe that his victory plan can succeed in the West, because of Zelensky's continued survival, will start to reinvest in him in a very short manner and commit forces otherwise they wouldn't. Russia can only stop this thing by destroying the Ukrainian government. And if they fail to do so, I'm afraid we're headed down a path where this leads to a nuclear war.
Many people who are supporting Biden's decision on this, they don't consider that the use of nuclear weapon is like a revolution, Scott, in my eyes. It happens just once and just destroy everything, just bring down this whole system. And it's not a protest, it's so important, but it doesn't seem that in the eyes of Europeans. Here is Starmer talking about this, Scott.
Game changer.
Well, I'm not going to comment.
It's been confirmed by Russia that they have landed in their territory.
Beth, you will understand. I'm not going to comment on operational
in
details.
In principle, are the missiles a game changer? In principle.
The reason that I'm not going to comment is, I think, well understood, which is Putin is the winner if we do so, and it will undermine Ukraine, and I'm not prepared to do that.
Just quickly, Russia's also threatened nuclear escalation. Are you comfortable with that when people at home are watching this, worrying that you could put us at risk?
Well, it's very important. It's very important that we're steadfast in our support for Ukraine. Russia is the aggressor,
even
and
if
Russia
it unleashes nuclear war.
Russia has to be the one that makes the move to stop this war. It's within their gift, but we must support Ukraine. It's impacting not just Ukraine; it's impacting the rest of the world, including the UK.
Is your message to viewers back home that there will not be a nuclear war, because that is what Russia is threatening?
These people are not concerned about anything of that nature.
You think Russia's bluffing? I would just ask people to read again Annie Jacobson's book, Nuclear War. It's terrifying. It's a work of fiction, but she interviewed dozens of former American officials who were involved in nuclear war planning and the nuclear enterprise. And she outlines a very plausible scenario. And the fact is, once you start, there's no such thing as a limited nuclear war. Anybody who believes in that, read the book and understand how it immediately just cascades out of control. Keir Starmer is an idiot. He's a dangerous idiot. I mean, I say this not because I want to insult the man, but I want to impart on your listeners that he is willing to kill you. He just said so. He's willing to have us all die, because that is the consequence. For what? Defending Ukraine. Again, I ask people, is a sovereign democratic Ukraine fundamental to the continued existence of the world, of Europe, of the United States? And the answer is no. Would the supporters of Ukraine like there to be a sovereign and independent democratic Ukraine? Sure, they would like that to happen. But right now, it's not going to happen. There's a 2.5-year war that Russia is winning. And now the question is, how much is the West willing to double down on trying to achieve a Ukrainian victory? What price are they willing to pay? And Russia has said that the price will be nuclear war that will kill us all. Keir Starmer believes that it won't. Read the book. 72 minutes after the initiation of a low-grade nuclear conflict, a limited nuclear conflict, the world ends. 72 minutes. 72 minutes. 72 minutes. I don't know what you can do in 72 minutes. Not much. That's all you have once it starts. 72 minutes. Unless you're some of the people that caught up in the early phases of it. And we're talking about, bombs of, 500 kilotons. The bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima was 15 kilotons. We're talking about thousands of 500 kiloton bombs striking targets in Europe and the United States. Over 100 million degrees instantly, hotter than the sun, will devastate an area of 10-mile radius. Gone, vaporized. All that will be sucked up into the atmosphere thousands of times. The sky will darken with radioactive dust, leading to a global ice age that will last for a decade or more. The billions of people who will die because of this nuclear conflagration will be covered with a field of ice. When it does eventually thaw out, then we'll have billions of rotting corpses that will bring pestilence to any of the survivors, but there won't be survivors because you can't grow food, you can't drink the water, you can't breathe the air. And so we all die because Keir Starmer wants to make a point, because Tony Blinken wants to make a point, because Jake Sullivan wants to make a point. Well, Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan were told by the American people, we don't want that point made. Keir Starmer hasn't even brought it to the British people. He's making a decision on their behalf without even consulting them. I can guarantee you that if Keir Starmer took it to a vote for the people of England, that we're going to support an attack against the Russian soil, knowing that it will lead to thermonuclear war and you will all die, that the British people say, no, we don't vote for that. We don't support that. Nobody would support that. And yet these politicians are heading down that direction, making it because they think Russia is bluffing. They think Russia's bluffing. I mean, for the sake of humanity, I guess we have to hope that Russia's bluffing at this point in time. But I don't think Russia is bluffing. And I'm very nervous about what's to come. The only way out of this right now is either for Russia to fold like a house of cards, which they're not going to do, or for Russia to take out Zelensky, to terminate any idea of a victory plan and viability, and then call NATO's bluff. Let's turn it around, because I can guarantee you this. Keir Starmer will have to put on a pair of Depends if Russia calls NATO's bluff, because he will be peeing his pants in fear. Because NATO's not ready to go to war with Russia. They're not ready for this. Russia needs to take out Kiev, take out Zelensky, and then tell NATO, what are you going to do about it? And the answer is nothing. NATO will do nothing because they can't. NATO only acts on weakness, the perception of weakness. And right now, Russia is perceived by NATO as being weak because Putin hasn't acted immediately, as he said. Remember, Putin said the decisions have already been made. The orders have already been given. Well, I don't know. I saw 6 ATACMS missiles strike Russia this morning. Has a decision been made? Have the orders been given? Then why aren't they being implemented? Russia's inaction fuels NATO aggressiveness, NATO overconfidence. And if Russia doesn't respond soon, you're going to see the next step, which will be scalp missiles, storm shadow missiles. Remember, they only have a 2-month time frame to effect this change, they being NATO. So there's going to be acceleration. The United States will now provide longer range missiles. More aircraft will come in, extended air defense. And next thing you know, Ukraine is part of NATO. And if Russia doesn't do anything, that's the reality. That's the outcome that's going to happen.
I wonder if the Biden administration is communicating with Trump and his team on this matter.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think you see fury inside the Trump administration because they have a mandate for change, and the Biden administration is totally disregarding this mandate. They're acting as if the American people didn't speak clearly about what they want. I mean, this is dangerous for democracy. It's dangerous for the world. It's an insult to democracy. Joe Biden saying, "I don't care what the people said." The people clearly have said they don't want to continue your policy with Ukraine. And yet Joe Biden is now forcing a war to tie up Donald Trump's hands so that when Donald Trump becomes president on January 20th, he will be presented with a fait accompli, that he can't implement the changes. Remember, NATO's doing this because NATO understands, left to his own volition, Trump is going to end NATO. NATO is a corrupt edifice. Trump views it as such. He views it as an organization that has no justification. But if suddenly you make NATO relevant by imposing NATO on Ukraine to confront Russia, and now Trump has to deal with this reality, it changes everything. It gives NATO, a new lease on life. And so that's what's happening here. This is the equivalent of me going to Las Vegas, mortgaging my house, taking my children's college fund, everything, and just going in and putting it all on red and praying that the roulette ball comes up red. Not once, but 5 times in a row, because that's what I need to win. Odds are it isn't going to happen, but that's the kind of gambling mentality that's taking place with the Trump administration right now.
Here is what Waltz, the next national security advisor to Donald Trump, said on Fox News. Scott.
2 months left in office. Joe Biden has done something that's been called on to do since this war started. Allow Ukraine to strike Russia with everything that we give them, the ATACMS, which are long-range missiles. Hit Russia where they're trying to hit them from. Your reaction to that, and were you briefed ahead of time?
I was not, Brian, and it's another step up the escalation ladder, and nobody knows where this is going. North Korea is unleashing ballistic missiles, artillery, now tens of thousands of soldiers. The administration responds by lifting this restriction. North Korea sends more soldiers. South Korea is now saying it may get engaged. China is buying oil from Iran for pennies of the dollar. Iran is using that to send missiles and drones to Russia that is then hitting Ukrainian critical infrastructure. So this is a development, but it's a tactical one. President Trump is talking grand strategy here. How do we get both sides to the table to end this war? What's the framework for a deal? And who's sitting at that table? Those are the things that I and President Trump, of course, will be working with. Again, this is an all-star team, Brian, that President Trump is assembling.
Yeah. Do you find it that right now with this decision that would bring some sort of difficulties to the relationship, there is no relationship, to the talks between the United States and Russia in the Trump administration?
I've always said that Donald Trump's idea of being able to pick up the phone and call Vladimir Putin and bring this war to an end in 24 hours is an absurdity. It's impossible, because Vladimir Putin is not the kind of leader that would respond to that unless Russia is bluffing. In that case, Vladimir Putin may be looking for a way out. It's a hell of a gamble, though, because I don't think Russia's bluffing. I think the gentleman that you spoke to, the future national security advisor, Mr. Waltz, I believe his name is.
Yeah, Michael Waltz.
Yeah, I think he's unrealistic in the extreme. First of all, everything he said, the way he couched this problem is just crap. I don't want to get you demonetized for using bad words, so it's garbage. There's no evidence that North Korean troops are deployed into Russia. In order for that to happen, you would have to believe that Russia, which is a very legalistic nation, would allow North Korea to send troops to Russia before the treaty that would empower that had been ratified and made into law. That's not how it works. But we've made this up. This is part of the justification. Remember, the reason why we're authorizing the ATACMS missile to strike Kursk is that we've created a script, a narrative that says North Korean troops are coming into Kursk. This is a game changer that we have to empower the Ukrainians to respond to. There's no evidence whatsoever that North Korean troops are in Kursk, and I don't believe they are, because what's the legal framework? Russia just doesn't allow foreign troops onto its soil. There has to be a legal framework. That legal framework didn't exist at the time when we said North Korean troops were coming in. So, no, we made this up, and we're making it up because we also want South Korea to start shipping munitions and weapons to Ukraine. South Korea was hesitant to do that, but now with this so-called North Korean escalation, South Korea is now engaged. This is about once again, the United States lying to the world, lying to the American people about a non-existent threat in order to justify military action. It's the same model of lies and deceit that led us to a war in Iraq. The only difference was that the Iraqis didn't have nuclear weapons, and we couldn't pay a price because we were going to win that fight. Here, the Russians do have nuclear weapons, and all this escalation, there's no guarantee that we're going to prevail. It could just lead to nuclear disaster. This is a very, very dangerous situation. I would also say that the National Security Advisor, future National Security Advisor's belief that he's going to have a serious role in shaping Donald Trump's worldview is a little misplaced. Donald Trump is a top-down leader. Just ask John Bolton, that's H.R. McMaster's, ask Michael Flynn. What it was like to be the National Security Advisor for Donald Trump. Donald Trump does what Donald Trump wants to do when Donald Trump wants to do it. And the others aren't going to advise him. The person that has perhaps the most influence over him will be Tulsi Gabbard, who won't allow this kind of garbage to be fed to him, this falsified intelligence. She will dig down and say, no, Mr. President, there's no evidence of this. This is the truth. This is what's happening, et cetera. And then the president will turn to the National Security Advisor and say, I want a meeting with Putin, and your job is to make that happen. If the National Security Advisor says, Mr. President, I advise against that, he won't be National Security Advisor for too long. You don't advise the president against the president. You support the president's decision. That's one of the things that that Trump learned from the first time around. They let too many people oppose him. We could have had a denuclearized North Korea. That's the irony here. That had Donald Trump succeeded in his outreach to North Korea, we wouldn't be talking about North Korean troops potentially being in Russia. We wouldn't be talking about North Korean ballistic missiles. It would be a completely different dialogue because we would have normalized relations with North Korea and we moved down the path of stability. That's what Donald Trump wanted to do. He was opposed by his Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, National Security Advisor, Director of National Intelligence, and everybody on his staff. They opposed it. He learned from that lesson. He won't brook opposition. He's been mandated to carry out a revolution, and he's going to carry out that revolution as he sees fit. And so I think these people that think Marco Rubio is going to have an impact, he won't. You think Waltz is going to have impact, he won't. The one who will have the most impact is Tulsi Gabbard because as Director of National Intelligence, she gets to brief him on the worldview every morning. And that conversation will shape Donald Trump's worldview. And then he will give direction to others to implement. But they aren't going to tell him what to do. He's going to tell them what to do.
Welcome back to my channel. Today I am back with another new video. In this video, Scott Ritter will discuss about Russia-Ukraine war. If you don't know who is Scott Ritter,
I need consumables.
Scott Ritter is an ex-army officer of US military, and he is well narrator of war. And he wrote some books about war and current affairs. So
Watch out!
So if you like to watch our related videos which are described by Mr. Ritter, then you can subscribe my channel and you can watch each and every of my videos. So guys, I hope we are good. keep watching my video. If you like to watch all related video, then
Marked
you
a
can subscribe
location.
my channel. I have uploaded. Guys, keep watch my channel. Now still watching. In this now we have play a game which name is BGM and I kill a guy from here in this match. So guys, if
Get
you
in the
like
car.
this type of video too, then you can also subscribe my channel. Now I'm going to buy in this video from here. So I hope you guys will enjoy this video. Thank you guys. I'll be back with another video next time. Bye for now.